Hello students, and welcome back to the Lore of the Iron Kingdoms with me, Professor Caster. Today it's going to be a little bit different Today we are actually going over my step-by-step painting process that I did for the two-player box set of Khador and Cygnar that Steamforge is about to release, or has already released at the time of this footage. And then after each model, we're going to be going over their stat cards, and then at the end of the video, I'm just going to go over some game tests that we have done with it at my local shop and see how they played out. And for many of you that probably already figured this by looking at the cards, the gun mages are fantastic at range, but we will get into more of that as we go along. Also, before we begin, if you do enjoy these videos, please like, comment, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. Please share this with your friends and fellow gamers alike. And thank you so much, Steamforge, for sending us out an early copy of the two-player box set for us to review, paint, and just see how well this stuff looks. But without further ado, let's begin. And the first model that we're doing the painting tutorial over is the Jackal, the Warjack and Warbeast Hunter of Khador. We start with a black coat, followed by a gray dry brush, followed by a white high brush. Then we start with a black coat. I used contrast black on all the black pieces. Then we moved on to the red contrast paint as well, just so we can get those armor panels in. And it does really bring out the highlights in it, so we also enjoy it. Then we move on to a leather. Whenever I do the leather, I always start with a light leather, and then I go to the dark leather, just so you can have some nice variations in the tones, just because, well, it just looks nicer in the long run. And then we move on to the finished piece, where we added all the metals, all the detail work, high brush, and highlights and whatever. For most of the highlights on the metal plates, I just used a matte red paint, just so you can get those top tier edges on there. And then, of course, the fire and smokes from his rocket launcher thing going off. And then, of course, I did some glamour shots right here, as you can see. We did this in front of some of the city terrain that I have created, with some of the random posters and some of the odds and ends that we have that. And because since my camera is not the best at getting clear pictures and for moving objects, doing a little glamour shot, you can see the high detail of this model right here with his mustache, his majestic mustache, and all of his fantastic sculpt. I also like the fact that he's standing on a Cygnar Warjack head, because he is definitely a Warbeast and Warjack hunter. But as mentioned before, at this point, I'm just going to go over their card real quick and just give some of my thoughts on it as well. So his name is Sergeant Goran Lazarenko the Jackal. Speed 6, Mat 6, Rat 7, Defense 14, Armor 14. He is tough, he is immune to fire, he's immune to corrosion, he has Pathfinder, and he has Advanced Deployment, so he can be put out a little bit further. His special abilities include an alchemical mask, so he does not suffer gas effects, and when determining line of sight, this guy ignores cloud effects and concealment granted by cloud effects. He is a marksman, so when damaging a Warjack and Warbeast with a ranged weapon, you get to choose which branch or column that it goes into. So if you're going after something that has, say, not very much health, or a certain branch that does not have very much damage boxes in it, you can remove a Warbeast or a Warjack arm pretty dang easily. This guy has Prowl, so when he gets Concealment, he gains Stealth, which is convenient that with the spell rack of the Warcaster for the new Mark IV, you can actually just give everybody Fog of War, granting Stealth to most of this army. He has Reposition 3, so after his activation that he did not run or fail a charge, he can move up to 3 inches away. His weapon is what makes him the most dangerous to Warbeast and Warjacks, being called the Jackbuster. Rat 7, range 12, rate of fire 1, AoE 2, and it is a power 14 7. So that's a pretty dang decent amount, makes this guy a little walking artillery piece. The additional abilities on this weapon are brutal damage, so on a direct hit, it gains an additional die to this weapon's rolls against the target directly hit. So this guy is rolling 3 damage die, which basically makes him a weapon master if he hits his target directly. So that makes this solo take him up to 11. He also has a critical stagger, so on a critical hit, this model, the model hit loses its initial attack and cannot make power attacks or special attacks for 1 round. This is devastating, especially since this critical stagger cannot be shaken. So if you hit somebody's Warjack you can really narrow them up. Or if you hit somebody's solo and they survive, it kind of makes them mute for that turn. Then of course he has a combat knife, because why would a Kodor specialist not have some sort of melee weapon? His combat knife is a Mat 6, range 1, and POW 9. Definitely not a melee guy. He really wants to stay as far away from the people he's shooting at as possible. I would say this guy is great, but I have not got to use him because for everybody that knows what he does, they will shoot him off the board as fast as they can. And with the Black 13th, they have one of the guys grants them the ability to see stealth models, which does not help in the long run. But that's how it goes sometimes in the game. But let's move on to the next painting. All right, and we're starting with the Hounds. This is Tatiara of the Hounds. The Hounds are basically a commando unit, but updated with new tech. We start with the black, then the gray coat. Then we move on to the black contrast paint on all the points that are supposed to be contrasted. We stuck with the box art just because that makes my painting style way faster if I just know what colors are going to be before we start. Then we move on to the red coats. That shield is looking beefy. And then we move on to the grayscale as well. Start with light, then cover the pieces you want with the darker leather as well. And it always looks fantastic. Pretty happy with how those turned out. Then we finish off the metals, make some, do any kind of specialty paints, paint her goggles up with their colors, and hit it all with a little bit of ink wash so they set in. And this is a unit, but we're just going to read each individual because I broke them up in the video of each painting set we did. So her name is Tatiara. She is part of the Hounds. Her speed is 6, Mat 6, Rat 6, Defense 14, Armor 15. She has Tough, Immunity to Fire, Immunity to Corrosion, Pathfinder, Dual Attack, and Advanced Deployment. Her special abilities are the Alchemical Mask, since I feel like most of these guys are very similar to the Assault Commandos of Kodor's previous renditions. So that Alchemical Mask, as mentioned, allows this model to not suffer gas effects, and when determining line of sight, she can ignore cloud effects and concealment granted by cloud effects. She is girded, so this model and friendly models base to base gain resistance to blast. She has grant inspiration for the rest of her unit, which gives them a +1 to their attack rolls. She has shield wall, so if she's base to base contact with this unit, they gain +2 armor and cannot be knocked down. Her weapon, or her 2 weapons, because she has dual attack, are a Death Whisper Carbine, which is a Rat 6 or 7 because of her ability. Range 8, range of fire 1, and POW 6, and she can shoot with it in melee. It is armor piercing, that's why it's a POW 6, so when calculating the damage with this weapon, have the base armor stat of the model's hit. So that's awesome. Also with armor piercing stuff, when you have the armor, the spell stuff is added after its halved. So say they had a +2 armor, so it would be, a 20 goes down to a 10, then 12, you see where it is with a +2. But if they have a negative, that adds in afterwards. So if they go down to a 10, then they go down to an 8 with a -2. Hopefully that makes sense. So this is pretty staggering for heavily armored models, but at a POW 6, not the worst of the armor piercing weapons that I've seen. Then she has her battle shield, which is a Mat 6 or 7 due to her granted inspiration ability, a range 1, and a POW 12, which is actually pretty decent POW for a melee weapon. So pretty happy with that. Much better than the Jackal's melee weapon, but of course he's carrying a rocket launcher, so that makes a little bit more sense. Her armor piercing round is a pretty fantastic in the long run. I was not able to fully utilize it just because since they are a speed 6, it is a little bit more difficult to get them up to the other army that wants to try to stay as far away from people as they can. So the name of the game for this team is try to get them into melee as quick as possible, since they do have the ability to shoot in melee and their battle shield is good in melee, and then they have dual attacks, so they are pretty staggering to enemies that they can get into melee with. But let's move on. Alright, we are moving on to Fedeniak, or I just call him Fedi because, well, it's easier for me to say. You can see the gray coat, followed by, of course, the black coat, as all of these are going to be pretty similar to the setup on here. And as you can see with the black contrast coat, it does give a nice little mini highlight to that. And then we go to the red contrast paint that we used for these guys. Makes them, I don't know. Really, I feel like the contrast paint really does make these way quicker to paint. Then, of course, we go over to the leather coats. Light leather followed by heavy leather. In the areas you want to be heavy leather, or dark leather, sorry. Heavy leather, dark leather. And then this is the final piece after we add the metals in. I only use 2 metals, which would be a silver and a copper, and then I hit them with an oil. And then we do any cleanup, and we finish up the base, as you can see. Fetty is part of the Hounds. Speed 6, Mat 6, Rat 6, Defense 14, Armor 15, and while the other lady's active, his Mat and Rat go up to a 7. He has Tough, he's immune to fire, immune to corrosion, Pathfinder, dual attack, advanced deployment. He has the alchemical mass, so he ignores cloud effects, or gas effects, and then he ignores line of sight and concealment from cloud effects. He is also girded, so while he's base to base with this model and friendly models base to base, gain resistance to blast, so that's fantastic. Keep these guys close together. His granted ability for the unit is Prowl. So while this model is in play, the entire unit gains Prowl. So while they have concealment, they have stealth, which again, with the warcaster having Fog of War as one of her chosen spells, it does make pretty much these guys invisible to anybody unless they ignore stealth. So that is where it is. They all have shield wall, so you want to keep these guys tight, tight, tight. Gets them up to an armor of 17 while they're together. His weapons include a grenade launcher, Rat 6, range 12, rate of fire 1, AoE 2, POW 12, 8, and he does have the ability to shoot in melee, which for blast damage for somebody who has girded, probably not going to do all that much damage to himself. Especially since he has a 17 armor if he's next to somebody and a 15 armor out, so you would have to roll over a 7 to really damage him. Then he has on his grenade launcher arcing fire, so when this model attacks with this weapon, he can ignore intervening models, so he just shoots over people. Very convenient. Yeah. So, and then of course he has his battle shield of a Mat 6, range 1, POW 12. So again, you want to get these guys into melee, but this guy's grenade launcher does allow him to do some decent damage, especially to some guys that are low armored, because even if he misses, that's a POW 8. So if they only have an armor of like 11 or 12, that's only a dice -4, which is easily get overable for that one. So yeah, makes him fantastic. But again, the Hounds like being in melee. Try to get them in melee as quick as possible. And hopefully the Prowl keeps them alive long enough to get into melee. So I can see them really being expanded out with some, once you add more pieces outside of just the 2-player box set. But with just the 2-player box set, these guys actually did pretty well. None of them actually, well, I think whenever we played, only one of them got killed, but I can't remember which one it was. But that was after a few rounds of being shot up. So there you go. But let's move on. All right, and then we move to the last guy, Scrobola, or however you say that. I'm going to call him Scrobes. You see the gray coat that we added, followed by the black coat with his fantastic little machine gun looking thing. Again, the contrast paints really do make this way faster. Or you can always water down some of your normal paints and use them kind of like a contrast paint. I don't know if that would work. But then we add the red coat as well. And then we add the what leather pieces we have, starting with light leather, working to dark leather. Just because I always keep those. And then we have him with his finished metals and all of his fun stuff painted up and inked down, so everything kind of blends in together. And then we move on to his stat line. He has a speed 6, mat 6, rat 6, defense 14, armor 17, tough, immunity to fire, immunity to corrosion, pathfinder, dual attack, and advanced deployment. He has all these standard abilities of these guys, being the alchemical mass, so he can ignore gas effects, and line of sight and concealment granted by cloud effects. He's also girded, so he has resistance to blast. What he grants is reposition 3, so after the unit moves that did not run or fail a charge, the units can move up to 3 inches, which makes these guys incredibly more mobile, because then it moves their base speed up to a 9 on the basic, or if they charge, you can get them up to a 12. So yeah, makes them even more great getting across the field and into melee combat, because that's where they want to be. And they, of course, they have shield wall, so it gets their armor up to an 18. So with the full unit all active, nobody dead, He has a mat of 7, rat of 7, so very, very useful. But his weapons are an assault cannon. It is a rat 6 base, or 7 with this unit. Range 12, rate of fire D3 plus 1, so you can get to going on some bullets there. POW 12, decent damage. He also has the gunfighter ability, so he can shoot in a melee with himself. His weapon abilities, he has volume fire, so he gains a +1 to the attack and damage rolls of this weapon against medium base models, and a +2 to attack and damage rolls against larger base models. So when he's shooting like a warjack or something at a large base, he gets up to a POW of 14 and a rat of 8 or 9. So yeah, it's hard to miss if you're shooting at bigger things with this weapon. So very useful there. And since you can shoot multiple times, you can really start chunking away at things. And then of course he has his battle shield, as you can see. And his battle shield again is a mat 6, range 1, POW 12. So very useful. You want to get these guys up into melee, as mentioned multiple times before. But from ranged, this guy and the grenade launcher guy do some pretty decent stuff if they can hit their targets. At a mat 7 or a rat 7, you would think that was a little bit easier, but the models they're going up against can get some pretty high defense. So if you can't hit it with blast damage, it's gonna be pretty pitiful. So try to get you guys into melee, and then you can avoid all of those negativities. But let's move on. Alrighty, as you can see, we are on to the warcaster of the bunch with the grayscale coat, looking pretty solid. And all those detail and raised bits, Captain Zahara Vilkul just looks awesome. Also a little bit finicky when you're putting them together, but we'll figure it out. There she is with the black coat and her fantastic little knife and axe combo, which surprisingly worked out really well in the game we played. There she is with her red armor contrast coat. We try to get focus. Really getting focused with my setup was very difficult. That's why we're doing the still shots at the end. There she is with her leather contrast coats with the dark and light, and then we just did her hair while we were at it because her hair is like a brownish tone, so it's a little bit easier at that point. And then of course we did all the metals and any kind of details, added some plants to the base, kind of finished up some of the stuff, added any kind of rust effects that we were going to add on those rebar bases. But yeah, she is a pretty phenomenal model. All right, let's read her stat card. So she has breakthrough, so she can run through melee without having to stop. She has tough, she has immunity to fire, she has immunity to corrosion, she has pathfinder, she has dual attack. Her speed is 7, so she is incredibly fast. Her magic attack is 6, mat of 7, rat of 7, defense 16, armor 15, arc is 6, control range is 12 inches. She also has the alchemical mask that the rest of the army has, so it doesn't suffer cast effects, and when determining line of sight and concealment, she can ignore cloud effects. She has field marshal prowl, so all of her cohort models also gain prowl. So of course, when she has fog of war going, everybody is stealth. She also has prowl herself, so when she gains concealment, she gains stealth. She has rise, so if this model is knocked down at the beginning of your maintenance phase, she stands up. She has takedown, so models disabled by a melee attack made by this model cannot make a tough roll. Models boxed by a melee attack made by this model are removed from play. And what makes her so dangerous is her melee weapons, but we're going to start with the range and then we'll get down to it. So her thrown axe has a rat of 7, range of 8, rate of fire 1, AoE, well, it doesn't have an AoE. Power 13, she has the ability to make these attacks in melee, so it gives her an additional attack there, and these are magical weapons as well. So she actually has attack types. So attack type, each time this weapon is used to make an attack, choose one of the following special abilities. First ability, Eruption of Ash. On a direct hit, when a model is boxed by this attack made by this weapon, center a 3-inch cloud effect on the model, and then remove that model from play. The template is a hazard and remains in play for 1 round. Enemy models entering or ending their activation in the template suffer a power 12 fire damage roll. So this gives her some nice ability that if she's cutting through the enemy, she's going to be leaving some nice AoEs that will do additional damage and give her more field control. The second ability you can put on her weapon is Ward Breaker. When resolving an attack with this weapon, it gains Blessed. What Bless does is it removes armor and defense buffs granted by magic. So they get a bunch of buffs that grant them stuff. She just ignores it when she's going in with this. Then we move on to her melee weapons. Her mechanical axe, swinging now instead of being thrown. And as you can see, she has a lot of axes to throw, because I think she has 4 axes on her back and 1 in her hand, so it's quite a bit. So with her Mechanica axe in melee, it is a Mat 7 range 1 power 13, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it is quite a bit, especially since she is a weapon master in melee. So it's a weapon master and magical, so she can take on incorporeal models. And she has the same 2 attack types on it. She still has Eruption of Ash, which we just read, and then she still has the Ward Breaker that you can put on it, which is Blessed, which ignores the defense and armor granted by spells. So yeah, this is pretty phenomenal. She likes being in melee. Get her in melee as quick as possible, and with her spells that she has, getting her into melee as quickly as possible is pretty easy to do. And then she of course has a combat knife as well, as you can see on the model. It is a Mat 7 range 1 POW 10, and also a weapon master, and it's also magical as well, because, well, she's a warcaster, so most of the weapons that she has are magical. Her feat is called Pall of Ashes. Pall of Ashes, that's what it is. Place D3 plus 3 cloud effect templates anywhere completely within her control range, and while in the templates, friendly faction models gain Pathfinder and can move through obstruction, and other models, if they have enough movement, to move completely past them. And then while in the template, living models suffer a -2 defense, -2 attack rolls, and they lose tough unless they ignore gas effects. And Pall of Ashes lasts for 1 round. This is actually super useful if you're about to run her into somebody and you need to lower their defense because they're too dang high, which is what we did in the game, and my opponent didn't realize that she could do all of that. But of course, first time playing, any warcasters are very dangerous because you don't know what kind of spells or what kind of abilities they can swing out with. Her spells that she comes with that are not racked are Cold Front. So the spellcaster gains Chiller for 1 round, or for 1 turn, and while within 2 inches of a model with Chiller, enemy models without resistance to cold suffer a -2 defense, which is very useful, especially if you're going up against very high defense models. It just freezes them up. So, but what saved the game after losing most of my army before we got into the melee rounds was Cyclone. So what Cyclone does is it's a attack of 6, cost of 2, range of self, and non-offensive. So the spellcaster immediately makes a full advance. At the end of the movement, the spellcaster can make 1 basic melee attack against each model in the line of sight and in its melee range, and then Cyclone can only be cast once per activation. So what happened was, with her ability for Cyclone, she can move 7 inches up the field and then move another 7 inches with Cyclone, giving her a range of 14 inches moving up the board. And then she can hit everything for free within her melee range, which is only 1 inch, so it's not like, crazy. It's not like those guys with reach or anything like that. But since she is a melee beast, we were able to get into the melee range of the opposing warcaster, being Kane, and she popped her feet prior to that, dropped a -2 defense on Kane, dropping him from I believe a 15, 17, we'll read that in a little bit, defense down to something more manageable for her to hit. And she hit, and she ended up rolling a boxcars 3 ways on Kane, which was surprising to everybody on the board, which knocked Kane down, even with his focus, down to like 3 health. So that ended the game rather quickly, especially since then she can do her initial attacks afterwards, since she didn't do any initial attacks prior to moving up the board and casting her spells. So you see how that ran and how that ended, being that we only killed 1 person on the Signar side, and that was their warcaster, which ended the game rather abruptly. Although Kodor, we lost our warjack, we lost our solo, and then we lost one of the guys from the Hound. So it was not looking good up until that point. But you never know. In Warmachine, crazier things happen on the field, and sometimes the dice rolls just play out for random events. So that is how it goes. But yeah, as far as the warcaster goes, she is phenomenal in melee. She's great at field control, especially with the ability to the Pall of Ashes really make it a lot more doable in the long term. So yeah, I would recommend her 9 times out of 10, at least for the Mark IV models I've played. So, but let's move on to her Warjack. And we are moving on to Razor. You can see I did the black coat followed by the gray highlight. For whatever reason, the Warjacks came up way clearer on the camera. I'm not sure if it's just because they were bigger models. Most likely that's probably what it is. Maybe it shifted better on it. Then we have the other black contrast coats. There it is. Looks pretty solid, if I do say so myself. And then we move on to the red coat, which is most of this model. Most of it's red coat. As most Warjacks are, their main color schemes usually go pretty well. And since these guys are not like camouflage or anything like that, because, you know, they're a Warjack, people know they're coming, I guess it just doesn't need to be all hidden. Which is nice. And the colors look really solid on this, especially the bigger plates. The contrast paints really come through with bigger plates. And there he is with his metals and his highlights. Basically on those glowing pieces, all you do is you hit it with you color them in white paint, and then you hit them in with yellow contrast paint, and that's how you get that glowing effect. And even if you get a little bit outside the lines with the white paint, it just adds to the glow if it's over with the yellow. So yeah, very, very nice. But let's go over his stat line and see how much more dangerous this guy is. His name is Razor. He has the trample, he has slam, he has headbutt, he has immunity to fire, he has immunity to corrosion, he has pathfinder, he has dual attack, and he is a construct model. Yeah, all of these guys are basically immune to fire and corrosion, as you can see. He has a speed 5, he has a mat 7, a rat 6, defense 11, and armor 19. His abilities include anchor, so friendly warrior models cannot be knocked down while base to base with this model. He has reposition 3. So at the end of this model and / unit's activation, that it did not run or fail a charge, this model can advance 3 inches, and then its activation ends. And then he has Swift Hunter, so if this model destroys 1 or more enemy models with a basic range attack, immediately after the attack is resolved, he can advance up to 2 inches. So this guy can move 2 inches after he kills something, then he can move another 3 inches to reposition, makes a very mobile and very dangerous Khadoran Warjack. And then his weapons include 2 grenade launchers, so he can make 2 shots with this. His grenade launchers are a rat 6, range 10, rate of fire 1, AoE 2, power at 10.5. Not the most of the power, but of course these are just those mini little grenade launchers. Then he has arcing fire, so he can ignore intervening models when making attacks. And then he has targeting flares, which is fantastic because that removes stealth. So instead of making an attack with this weapon, you can place a 3-inch template anywhere within 10 inches of this model, with a center point of the model's line of sight, ignoring intervening models because that's how it targets it with this weapon. While a model is within the template, it loses stealth, and the model can ignore cloud effects when determining line of sight to it. The template remains in play for 1 turn. So that basically turns off people's ability to hide behind clouds, and it turns off stealth, which is always very useful to the more hidey models, including old school trenchers that like to hide behind clouds. This guy removes that ability. His next, and he has 2 of those shots, so he can shoot with, he can make 1 a normal AoE shot and then 2 a targeting flare, so whatever he wants to do. Then he has another melee weapon, or another ranged weapon called Slug Cannon, a rat 6, range 8, not the most range, rate of fire 1, and POW 16, which is pretty staggering. He also has the ability to shoot that in melee as well. The abilities on the weapon are Momentum. A small or medium based model directly hit by this weapon is slammed D3 inches directly away from the model. The POW of the collateral damage is equal to the POW of this weapon, so 16/16. In addition to suffering a normal damage roll, a large base model hit by this weapon, hit by this attack, will become knocked down. So small and medium and everything is pushed back to 3 inches, and if you're large, you're also knocked down. Fantastic. He also is a siege weapon, so he gains an additional die with this attack against buildings and huge base models. So he likes going up against colossals and buildings for some reason. I know we don't see too many buildings outside some of the tower stuff that we got, but having that additional damage roll on that is fantastic. And especially for a POW 16 weapon, this guy's going to do damage to a Warjack every time he shoots. So this is not a little pitiful gun or anything like that. Although the range, could always be longer, but I imagine with a slug cannon like this, you don't really need it. He also has reload on this, so he can spend a focus or fury to make an additional range attack with this weapon during its combat action. So he can make 2 attacks with this and do some crazy damage to whoever he's shooting. His fun weapon is the Ripper Shield. It is mat 7, range 1, POW 18, so this is definitely what he wants to use in melee. And it gives him a +2 to his armor. So it kicks his armor up to a 21, which gives him a little bit more survivability. But if everybody's shooting at him at the same time, of course, you know, he is going to go down eventually. So his abilities on his weapon are critical shred. And on a critical hit with this weapon during this model's combat action, after the attack is resolved, this model can make 1 additional attack with this weapon against the model hit. So if it gets a crit, it'll hit again without having to spend any focus for it. Fantastic. Then he has beatback with this weapon, so immediately after a basic attack with this weapon is resolved during its model's combat action, the enemy model can be pushed 1 inch directly away, and then this model follows up 1 inch, so he can keep doing it some more. So as far as a warjack, this guy is pretty good at what he does. 21 armor, and if you give him more armor buffs, you can make his survivability even better. And with his normal abilities, being able to keep friendly models that are base to base from being knocked down is super useful for these guys all around. Sorry, dings happen. But let's move on to the... Oh, and whenever I was playing him, we got him a few, range shots that didn't do as much as we would like them to do, but after that, he kind of got ganged up by a bunch of different types of bullets and just got shredded, and it was very sad for him, but it broke the way for a caster kill, so it wasn't the worst thing to happen. So, but let's move on. Alrighty, you can see our fantastic gray coat for Captain Bastion Falk. He was a fun model. I love how dynamic the poses are on these new models. They're very, very nice. Always look like they're moving around, especially since these guys are supposed to be behind enemy lines type of models. So that does add to. But you can see the gray coats, followed by, of course, the black coat. And with all of the gun mages, they seem to really enjoy their black cloaks, which kind of nice. We did a little bit of cleanup after the fact, just to kind of narrow those things back up and get more of a hard edge on the lining of their coat. Here's him with the Signar blue contrast paint that we used. It's not called Signar blue, but it is contrast paint that happens to be blue. Here's him with his leather coats and his skin tones. And anytime I do somebody with a darker skin tone pattern, I usually just use a flesh shade and then I add a little bit of a brown wash into it. Just so you can get a deeper tone so they don't look so pale. But the flesh tone really does add some warmth in it. Here's him with all of his silvers and all of his fun stuff. With the magic gun that he has to do the runes, I did similar to what I did with the glowing effect on the razor, which would be adding a white or a washed or a very watered down white paint over the gun pieces, followed by a lighter blue tone, which is, on my end, it was a mix of a almost pale blue and the Signar blue contrast paint, and then you mix those together until you get a lighter blue tone, so whenever you go over the magical pieces of the runes, it soaks in and the white brings it up to the forefront, and then, of course, whenever contrast paint sinks into the runes, it gives it a little bit darker tone, so it makes it look like it's glowing. So that actually worked out well. But I did that for each of their magical weapons, at least the ones that were actively magical. But let's read about his card and see how cool he is. Captain Bastion Falk. He is a speed 6, mat 6, rat 7, defense 15, armor 12. He has Pathfinder, dual attack. He has the ability, if he wants, to ambush, and then he also has advanced deployment. His abilities include leadership, gun mages. So while at 10 inches of this model, friendly gun mages gain reciprocate. Reciprocate when it is missed by an enemy attack or an enemy range attack. Immediately after the attack is resolved, you can make one basic ranged attack targeting the attacking model, which turned out really well because every time I tried to shoot anybody, I got shot back, and when you shot back by a gun mage, it does more damage than your attack even did. And when you're trying to shoot things that have like a defense 15 or higher, you're probably going to miss a lot, so you're going to get shot a lot. So yeah, Kodor, need to get in with these guys as quickly as possible with melee, and then you'll probably do some decent damage. His other ability he has is Prowl, so while he has concealment, he gains stealth. And then he has Run and Gun, so at the end of its activation, if this model destroyed one or more enemy models with a ranged attack, it can make a full advance. So you can come in, kill something, and then move back out 6 inches. So very, very useful. And then let's go over his weapons. Like every gun mage, all of his weapons have multiple different types of bullets they can shoot out. But he is a Rat 7, a Spray of 8, a rate of fire 1. He has the ability to shoot in melee, as most gun mages do, and it's a POW 12 magical weapon. Alright, so attack types. Each time he makes an attack with this weapon, he can use one of these special rules. First one is Banish. When this weapon damages an enemy non-leader model, immediately after the attack is resolved, you can place that enemy model anywhere completely within 1 inch of its current location. So you can move guys around. Very, very useful, especially since it's a spray, so you can literally just move a bunch of guys out if you just need to, open up a charge lane or something. Second ability you can choose is Decrepitation. This weapon gains an additional die on damage rolls against construct and undead models, so making this guy a little weapon master there for a second. And then, and especially if he's going up against an army that's all mechanical, that would be pretty devastating on a spray attack. And then his final one is Incendiary. This attack causes fire damage, and the model's hits suffer the fire continuous effect. This is a very useful ability, especially since it makes his scatter gun into a flamethrower, basically. And what that is a lot more useful to other types of models he uses. Since most of the Kodor army that this guy's going against all have immunity to fire, it doesn't do as much, so we didn't see that much of this in the game. But he was very useful. Then he has a sword, so because why wouldn't he have a sword? His sword is a Mat 6 range 1 POW 10. That's pretty basic melee weapon just to give him those 2 attacks. Since he has dual attack, you want to make sure he can do what he needs to do. This guy, once he's hidden behind a wall, his defense goes up to 19, making him nigh unhittable with ranged weapons. And with that spray, he just kept, dinging until whatever he was knocking out, was destroyed. So, yeah, I think he was one of the major pieces that took out the Razor. So, very useful, and you just want to get all of these guys into melee as quick as possible. And if you can have any way to lower their defense, i.e. with the Warcaster and the Kodor set with their ability to, well, give people the freezer or the spells like that lower defenses of models they're near, it is very useful. But yeah, with these guys, if they stay out of melee range, they are just a pest, and they will do all sorts of damage to your army. So get them into melee, get it going. But having all those weapon abilities really makes these guys very, very useful in the long run. But let's move on. And then we will be moving on to the Black 13th. I believe we are looking at... this will be Watts, the sniper of the bunch. And we're going to be going over each of these guys' individual stat cards as well. I like his pose. I like anybody that has a sniper rifle just because they look super cool, and especially since they set up the models to actually look down the barrel. So there he is with his blue coat. And then of course after the black we did touch up a little bit on the edges so that whenever we went back over with the silver coat, it went back over with the highlight coats, it really just made it pop. There he is with his leather. There was a couple leather pieces I missed that we added to once we were doing our finishing coats to kind of make sure we got everything that we added in. Here he is with all of his silver, or all the coppers, his blue stuff on, or his blue spell stuff on his magical stuff. And then for his scope, we just did another set of the blue Signar, just so we had a nice shiny coat on there. Yeah, but he is a fantastic looking model, and I don't know, I just like the way they look. And we did all the hems of the Black 13th in the copper tone just because it looks kind of copper, so it just made sense to do it that way. But yeah, that's what we did. But let's go over Watts, a member of the Black 13th. So that he is inside a unit, but we're just going to read his abilities real quick. He has Pathfinder, he has Gunfighter, he has Dual Attack, and he has Advanced Deployment. So this guy can shoot outside of melee of himself, which is great. At least I believe that's the right tone. Yeah, I think it is, because it's going the opposite direction of the other one. So because this guy has a Mage Lock rifle, I guess he cannot shoot in melee with himself, which actually kind of makes sense with such a long gun. He has a speed 6, mat 6, rat 7, defense 15, armor 12, which means blast damage will do some damage to these guys. So, you know, if you have a lot of blast damage, I recommend you use that with the Black 13th, or pretty much any gun mage, because they all have crazy high defense. Alright, he has granted reposition 3, so while he is in play, all the models in his unit gain reposition 3 at the end of their activation. That they did not run or fail a charge, they get to move 3 inches. And then, of course, he has prowl as well, so if he has concealment, he gains stealth. Pretty simple stuff with this guy. His Mage Lock rifle is a rat 7, range 14, definitely a sniper rifle. Rate of fire 1, POW 10, magical weapon. And his bullet types on this, or his attack types that he can choose each round, are Black Penny, so this model ignores the targeting and melee defense bonus. Blast, this weapon becomes an AoE 2 POW 12 6 attack. And then brutal damage on a direct hit, models hit with this weapon suffer an additional damage die. So yeah, very devastating, but it is a POW 10, so you know, big guys, you still need to get at least a plus, or you still have a -8 on those as well, but it does remove lighter armored models pretty dang easily. And then his melee attack is rifle butt, of course, because you can see he doesn't really carry a melee weapon. So mat 6, range 1, POW 6. Definitely want to try to keep this guy out of melee, but at least he has the ability to shoot outside of melee from himself, so he can save himself the trouble with that. But let's move on to the next one. I believe that is Ryan. So there we are, having Ryan with her gray coat. And I like her pose as well. Her hair was kind of finicky to get on just because it was in a 2-piece set. But after you got that on, she was pretty easy to maintain. Here we are with the black coats. And then her black, well, we did her hair afterwards just because I wanted to kind of lighten up some of the tones on that. But yeah, covered in a lot of black cloth or leather or whatever their coats are made out of. I'm never entirely sure what their stuff's made out of. There she is with the blue. It really came in quite good. And with their blue, I actually highlighted them with like a standard blue after painting, or a lighter tone blue, so I can make the cloth pop up a little bit more. And then she is with her gray, or with her, not gray, her leather coats. Of course, as mentioned, I start with a light leather, and then I go over that with a dark leather, depending on where I want it, just so you can make sure they're all clean, fancy looking. Here we are with all of the metals painted, all of the glowy blue stuff's painted, and then we go over everything with a wash just to kind of tie it in with each other. And then of course we paint up the hems of it with a copper paint just to make it look nice. But Ryan is pretty fantastic, as well as every gun mage in melee is. So let's read over her card real quick. So she has Pathfinder. She has the ability to shoot outside of melee. She has dual attack, and she has advanced deployment. She has a speed 5, mat 6, rat 7, defense 15, armor 12. Granted prey, so she grants the entire unit she's in prey. So at the beginning of, or after deployment, but before the first turn, I get to choose an enemy model/unit that to be this unit's prey, and then that guy or that unit gets a +2 to attack and damage rolls, which kicks everybody's damage and rat up tremendously, which is very unfortunate for my Kodor guys, because they're like, oh, we have heavy armor, and prey kind of nerfs it quite a bit. Then she has prowl, so while she has concealment, she gains stealth. And let's go over her weapons. She has the ability to shoot into melee as well, because those are little handguns, which makes sense that she's able to shoot with those into melee. She has a rat 7, range 10, rate of fire 1, POW 10, or 12 if she's shooting her prey target. The bullet types or attack types she has with this weapon are brutal damage. So on a direct hit, it can gain an additional die on this weapon's attack damage roll against a target directly hit. She has Thunderbolt. Enemy models hit are pushed D3 directly away from the attacking model. On a critical hit, the enemy model becomes knocked down. Then she has Shadowfire. A model hit with this weapon does not block line of sight for 1 round. And then she has Chain Attack, Gun Mage Storm. If this model hits the same model with both its initial attacks with this weapon, center a Cloud Effect template on the model hit. The template is a hazard that remains in play for 1 round. A model entering or ending the activation in the template suffers a POW 12 fire damage roll. which is pretty epic. I appreciate that she can shoot 3 times if she hits the same target twice, which is awesome. But she's actually one of the ones that was critical in killing off of the killing the solo on the Kodor side, the Jackal, because she made the Warjack invisible, so the Warjack that was blocking line of sight no longer blocked line of sight, and then he just got shot up pretty quickly. So yeah, it was unfortunate for him that he did not survive, but that does happen. That is part of the randomness that is a Warmachine. She has a melee of gun blades. As you can see, she has little blades on the bottom of her guns. It is a Mat 6, range 1, POW 8. Not the most, but you know, it does give her 4 attacks in melee, which is still a lot of attacks for a person with that. But at a POW of 10-8 or 12-10, depending on if she's attacking her prey target, that is still a pretty significant amount of attacks to do. So yeah, but yeah, she's pretty OP'd, but I think every gun mage is like that. But I don't know, blast damage kills these guys just like elves do. So yeah, if you have lots of blasts that do decent amount of damage, or ways to increase the amount of damage or lower armor, you can really remove these guys pretty quick if you pre-prep before you go up against him. But with the 2-player box set, you can't choose the models that you're going up against these guys. So you just kind of have to play it on spells, on your spell rack or whatever, to keep these guys going. But let's move on to the final of the Black 13th. That being Glover. Here we are, Glover with his I'm trying to get in there with my knife stance. There he is with his gray coat. I like doing the gray coat because it allows me to pick out details that you wouldn't normally see, which just make painting much easier, at least for my style of painting. So, and of course, since I use contrast paints pretty heavily right now, it just makes everything a little easier. Here he is with his black contrast coat. Very nice. A lot of black, of course, with these guys. Then paint up is blue. And again, I am using what art they have on their stuff, so it's very box art-ish. Even though it might not be the same tones as the box art, it is the right color palette. So there you go. And then me trying to figure out how to get this guy to show up. Then we got the leather coats, of course, light leather followed by a dark leather or dark brown leather, to just make it a little bit easier. Also, when you're putting this guy together, make sure you read the instructions, because that little roll on his back, it did cause some issues. I had to pop out some stuff and reset it, and make sure you pre-plan. Here we are with his finished stuff, with all of his silvers and his coppers, and the base done with this little tuft of grass to make it look like a little broken area. But yeah, he was a fun model to paint. And I do all these guys in badge paint, so whenever you're seeing these guys out like that, I literally went through the entire box set with the grayscale, then with the blacks, then with whatever their armor color was, then with the leathers, and I was doing every single one of these guys like all at once with steps. So I just made it way faster. So by the time I got to the end, I could just it was pretty easy. I only had to pull out basically like 1 or 2 colors at a time. So yeah. Anytime you can do that, it's nice. But let's read over Glover's card. So he has Pathfinder. He has the ability to shoot outside of melee. He has dual attack. He has advanced deployment. His special abilities are True Sight, which caused all sorts of problems for the Kodor army. So because the Kodor army all has Prowl, True Sight allows you to ignore stealth. So I'm like, the entirety of the Prowl was kind of wasted on this particular unit. So yeah. So this unit can ignore Prowl with their True Sight. Then, of course, he has Prowl himself, so when he gets concealment, he gains cover. Or he gains stealth, sorry, not cover. His speed is 6, Mat 6, Rat 7, Defense 15, Armor 12. His weapons are a dual Mage Lock. Alright, so with his dual Mage Lock, I guess he has 2 different columns in there, so he can shoot twice with that gun. It is a Rat 7, range 10, rate of fire 2, and POW 10 weapon. He can use this in melee, and it is a magical weapon. His bullet types, or his attack types, are a Black Penny, allows him to ignore defense buffs. Brutal damage, on a direct hit, he gains an additional die to the weapon's damage roll. And at a POW 10, it's actually very useful to have that. Then he has Momentum. A small or medium based model directly hit by this attack is slammed D 3 inches directly away. And then the power of the collateral damage is equal to the power of this weapon. In addition to suffering a normal damage roll, a large based model hit by this weapon becomes knocked down. So very much like Razor's slug cannon, but a lot less damage than Razor's slug cannon, but the same effect still causes all sorts of problems. He also has a special attack called Both Barrels. This weapon gains +4 to its damage rolls for this attack. And this weapon cannot make additional ranged attacks with this weapon during its activation, in which it makes a both barrels attack. So it kicks the power of his attack up to a 14, or if he's shooting at his prey target, kicks up to a 16 with a rate of fire of 9 against a prey target, or a rat of 9 against a prey target. Which, yeah, Jesus, that is a lot of damage. And that's just one man of a unit. So, yeah, ranged attacks at that, just terrifying. And then, of course, he has a trench knife that you can see in his model that he's ready to just get all stabby on somebody. So, very, very useful there. And again, these guys, like, if you keep them out of melee, if you keep moving them around with, like, you know, if you grant with, like, reposition or something like that, like, this unit and any kind of gun mage is just going to wreak havoc on the enemy. So, yeah, the Kodor needs to get into melee, and these guys need to stay out of it as much as they can. So, but let's move on. And we are going to be moving on to the fourth rendition of Alistair Kane, Major Alistair Kane. We even got to give him some gray hair there, but let's look at his. We got the gray coat going there. He doesn't have as much black because he's more into the leather coat and cloak, just because he's kind of a I think the term is scoundrel a little bit. Because he's been with Signar, and then he switched over to being a mercenary for a bit, and then he pulled back into Signar, and it's like he's kind of jumped around quite a bit. He's had a very unique life. If you have not read the Ways of Cain book on the app, I suggest you do. A very, very fantastic book. You see all the cool stuff that he gets himself into, or that he doesn't want to get himself into. But there he is with the black coat, followed by his blue armor coat and his little power pack. We did some blue on there too, just so we could fit more of that in there. I love his pose, and on his weapons, you actually have you actually can choose either the ones that have the smoke and blast coming out of it, or you can choose to not have those at all. I kind of enjoy having the options on there, but I always like the special effects just because they make it look more dynamic. Here we are with all of his leathers, his light and dark leathers. Also his little sash around his neck, as I'm trying to gain focus there. And of course, I'm not actually actively doing this while of course, reading this, so this is after the fact. But his little sash is just the Kodor red, just because he wears a red sash for some reason. He probably has a reason in the book. If he does, let me know. But all those leathers look really nice. Here he is with all his silver paints and all of his touch-ups. And his hair does have a little bit of a gray highlight onto it, just because he is like 50 years old now. But he is still just as dangerous as he's ever been. But his leather cloak came out super, super well. Very shiny, which I feel like having shiny leather really makes him kind of pop on the field. So I do appreciate this model like that. Very fun to look at. And I just think he's just a nice model all around. And the amount of detail that we get from the sculpts with Steamforged just look amazing in the long term. Yeah, but as I try to get him to show up, it's very difficult. But we did do a couple still shots here as well. But let's read over his stat card so you can see what Kane number 4 looks like. All right, so he has a speed 7, a magic attack of 6, a rat of 9, a defense of 17, an armor of 13, arc of 6, control of 12. He has Pathfinder and the ability to shoot outside of melee. His special abilities are evasive, so when this model is hit by an enemy range attack immediately after the attack is resolved, this model can advance up to 2 inches, which did not help him when my warcaster got into melee with him. After she lowered his defense, because a 17 defense is super hard to hit, regardless if you're shooting or trying to hit with melee. He has a Field Marshal evasive, so a Warjack in his battle group gains evasive. So after his Warjack is hit by an enemy attack, he can move 2 inches too. He has Headshot. So this model, a Headshot. Models disabled by a range attack made by this model cannot make tough rolls. Models destroyed by a range attack by this model are removed from play. Alright, so, and then he has leadership, gun mage. So while within 10 inches of this model, friendly models gain headshot. So yeah, so all the toughness that the Kodor models had was also negated by this ability, because all of them were grouped together, and it was just, yeah, you can see how well that went. So again, Kodor models need to get into melee with these guys as quickly as possible, and these guys need to try to stay out of melee with Kodor models as much as they can. So let's go over his guns, because he does have his guns. Alright, Spellstorm pistols, Rat 9, range 12, rate of fire 1, and POW 12. He does have the ability to shoot into melee, and these are magic weapons. His attack types, or bullet types, or whatever. He has the Heartseeker, gain an additional die on damage rolls resulting from this attack, and then you discard the lowest die roll in each roll, so you can do more damage. You kind of helping your odds there. Then he has Thunderbolt, a model hit. Enemy models hit are pushed D3 inches directly away from the attack, and on a critical hit, the enemy models become knocked down after being pushed. So a crit, knock them over. And then he has Witch Mark, so if this model hits an enemy attack during this model's activation, until the end of the activation, this model can target and automatically hit that enemy model with spells ignoring range and line of sight. So it basically makes him an arc node, which is awful, especially if you're trying to keep your guys out of the ranged sights of these guys, but that's how it happens. And then he has Reload, so this model can spend 1 focus or fury point to make an additional range attack with this weapon during its combat action. And he has 2 pistols, so he can do that twice. So he can actually shoot up to 4 times with his weapons, and yeah. And being shot with a range 9, you're probably not going to miss, because that's basically the equivalent of the Butcher's melee attack. So when the Butcher gets into melee, he's going to hit. When Major Alistair Kane wants to shoot somebody, he's going to hit you. But let's read over his feat. It's called Arcane Conflagration. Or Conflagration. Conflagration? Yeah, dyslexia always likes to pop up with those big words. But while in Kane's control range, friendly gun mage and friendly faction warjack models, ranged weapons gain blessed, and the damage type magical, and +2 to their power. So he's going to make them way more powerful and be able to ignore any kind of armor buffs from spells. When a friendly faction model makes an attack with a weapon with attack types while in Kane's control range, that model can choose 2 special rules instead of 1, and it lasts for 1 turn. So basically every gun mage model that has a weapon type can choose two different weapon or attack type can choose 2 different ones to use at the same time per shot. So you can really stack some pretty awful things with each other. So yeah, and I think that's what destroyed my warjack and what took huge dinks out of my poor hounds. So, but yeah, it's pretty phenomenal, especially if you're playing a full gun line list of gun mages. You can do some incredible attacks. So, and that also stacks onto the prey targets for your Black 13th, so you can get them up to a +4 to their damage. And yeah, you can see all the you can see where everything just stacks up dramatically, and you have brutal damage. It's just a lot of very sad things that happen. But the spell list that he always has, outside of he has a rack slot 2, so you can choose 2 additional spells to add to here. His first one is Calamity. It is a magic attack of 6, cost 3, range 10, upkeepable and offensive. Calamity, target enemy model/unit suffers -2 defense and arm. Ouch. Then we have Heightened Reflexes, attack of 6, cost of 1, range 8, round duration, not offensive. Target friendly model cannot be knocked down or made stationary for 1 round. And the fact that it only costs 1 is actually super, super useful, because you can kind of spread that around to a bunch of different people. And it's not upkeepable, so you can cast that as many times as you have focus for it. And then he has Teleport. I think Kane's always had Teleport. Attack of 6, cost of 2, cast on self, not offensive. Place the spellcaster anywhere completely within 6 inches of its current location, then its activation ends. So, as you can see, he is a very dodgy and hard to pin down warcaster. So if you get somebody in melee, you best make sure that's the last melee attack you're going to get, because he was just going to teleport out and probably shoot up whoever was in melee. So the fact that we were able to get the warcaster, or the Kodor warcaster, in melee with him was a boon to him after you lowered that defense that he has of 17 down to a 15, and she's a pretty decent person to have in the melee with. So there you go. But he is very good if you can keep him out of melee. Well, he's pretty decent in melee too, as long as he has his full defense. So, but let's go over the Deuce. Let's see how we like those guys. And then we have Deuce, who is a super fun model. I love the dynamic stuff. I gave him a little step up on his base there, just so his gun's a little bit more higher up than it is. But having him shoot out like that actually makes him look really nice. But there he is with his black and gray coat, or his dry brush coat that we did, just so the underside is dark and the top side's lighten up and makes it a little bit easier to be able to see. Here we are with his little bit of black contrast paint that he has on him. I think it's just his shoulders basically, so gives him a nice little variation to his color tones, which we always enjoy. And then once you add the blue on him, he really pops out. There you go. Whenever you have the blue up on him, you can see it is, especially on those huge panels, like it really adds some variation to the paint style. And then adding damage in it is just as much as like you want to put little silver chips or whatever on there. But yeah, he turned out super well. And of course, these guys don't have any leather on them, so you don't have to worry about the leather step, unless of course you modify up the model to make him look like he's like a pack mule or something like that, which I suppose you could if you really want to in the long term. But yeah, he's a fantastic model. Here he is with all of his silver and stuff, silver and copper paints. And on the areas that were white, all I did was just go over there with a little bit of washed out white paint, just so you can make it kind of pop up as a white. But I had to go over a few coats to, like his knee pads and his little eagle that he has, or the Signar bird, or whatever that is. But yeah, and then his gun, we did the same way, adding the washed down white paint over the runes, followed by that bluish tone that we're using, and then on his little electrical nodes, we did the same thing with a little bit of white paint to make it up. And then we did this guy, this little still shot here at the end, just because it looks good. You know, it's a nice model, and you know, I like having all the variations. And this is in front of one of my Warjack workshops that we did. We did a couple different pictures here, just because the stills came out way more clear than the poor camera allowed. But let's read over his stat line just so you can see how much of a gun mage this guy is like. Alright, so Deuce, he has trample, headbutt, and slam. That's what it was. Sorry, sometimes I forget. He has dual attack, and he is a construct. He has a speed 6, mat 7, rat 7, defense 13, armor 18. His special abilities are accumulators, so gun mage. When this model begins its activation within 3 inches of one or more friendly gun mage models, it gains a +1 focus, or it gains 1 focus, not +1, sorry. Gains 1 focus. So this guy starts, during his activation, if he's within gun mages, he starts with 2 focus instead of 1, making him very focus efficient. He has reposition 3, so at the end of his turn, if he did not run or fail a charge, he can move up to 3 inches, allowing him a lot more mobility, especially at a speed 6. Gets him up to a speed 9 or a speed 12 on a successful charge round. He has true sight, so he is another guy that ignores stealth, and he also ignores cloud effects. So yeah, that's super useful to all of my guys that have stealth. I think the only person that couldn't ignore stealth would have been Kane and Bastion, which is kind of funny to go up against. He has a Spellstorm cannon, which is a rat 7, range 12, rate of fire 1, pow 14, so decently cannon. Not as powerful as the slug cannon, but definitely a lot more range. He has the ability to use that in melee, and it is a magical weapon. He also has attack types, because why wouldn't every gun mage in that army have attack types? His attack types include a beatback, so immediately after a basic attack with this weapon is resolved during this model's combat activation, the enemy model hit can be pushed 1 inch directly away, and then this model can follow up 1 inch directly towards it. And then he has a blast weapon option, so this weapon becomes an AoE 2, POW 12 6 for this attack. And then he has Decrepitation, so this model gains an additional die on damage rolls against construct and undead models. I'm not sure how well these guys would go up against, say, hordes models, or you know, War Beast style models, because a lot of these guys seem very set up to go up against warjacks and stuff like that. So, but I don't know. We'll see in the future how those guys play out. But him being able to give himself 3 damage die plus the damage die if he boosts the damage is can knock out some heavy damage, especially since he's given free focus and stuff like that. So very scary. But he also has, because why wouldn't he? He has powerful attack. So when attacking with this weapon, this model can spend 1 focus to boost all the attack and damage rolls of the attack. So not only is he fuel efficient with his decrepitation, 1 focus boosts all the attack and damage rolls of all of his weapons. So he's all attacks with that weapon. So yeah, it's crazy. And then he has reload, so he can do it again. So with 3 focus, this guy's damage is the limit of whatever amount of stuff you want to throw into it. So yeah, definitely a ranged warjack. But he does have a melee weapon of Crescent Blade. So it is a mat 7, range 1, POW 15, and it gives him a +1 armor. It's also a open fist weapon, and it's magical as well. So he can do all of the fun stuff like throwing people. But yeah, and it gives him a +1 armor, getting him up to an armor of 19, which makes him a little bit better. He's also slightly cheaper than Razor, but he has a lot less. Ranged weapons, because Razor has 3 ranged weapons and a melee weapon, get him up to 4. He only has 2 that he can reload once, so 3, that makes sense. But his range damage can just go through the roof in the amount of damage this guy can knock out, and he did. Although Razor was able to knock him down once with his slug cannon, which slowed up a little bit, not crazy amounts, because at a range 12, even if he knocks him down, it's whatever on that one, because then you can stand up and start shooting people again. So, but yeah, but Deuce super good at range attacks and highly recommended. But that will do it for this. I know this is a little bit longer video. We did go over my painting style. We did go over some playthroughs. We did go over the cards. So it's just a lot of very good info to get on these guys, which I appreciate you guys have sat through it if you have. And if you could, please hit that like button. Let me know if you would like any more content on the 2-player box set. I'll probably end up taking this video and breaking it up a little bit to a little bit more bite-sized chunks in the future, if you guys would like me to. Just to make it a little bit easier to sit through, or if you just want Signar, or just want Kodor, or however we want to play that. But if you could hit that like button, please subscribe, please comment. Commenting always helps. And again, thank you so much to Steamforge for sending us this 2-player box set early for review. It is phenomenal. I can't recommend this enough. For $100, this guy includes terrain. He includes 2 fully set up armies at 30 points each, so it's a small game, but it's a great way to get into it, because you get a unit, you get a solo, you get a warcaster, you get a warjack, and all of them are characters, so you get all the character stuff. And for $100, that is cheap, especially comparing us to some other war games in the spectrum. So yeah, but without further ado, class dismissed.